From bulking up for his blockbuster fight against Islam Makhachev to putting together an insane training camp, this is what Alexander Volkanovski does to prepare for his fights. Let's begin with how he had to bulk up for the Islam fight. He had a strict game plan that he followed to the very last day. The Great took great pains to bulk up just enough so as not to sacrifice his movement. In the 5-round clash of titans that followed, he'd still remain sharp to the last second. He even finished the fight on top of his lightweight champ opponent, preparing for relentless ground and pound. So it took incredible willpower and attention to the little details.
Official weight 144.5 for the champion, Alexander Volkanovski.
Underneath it all were the physical differences between the two champions. On one hand, there was Islam, who's taller and has a farther reach, all while packing all that muscle on his back. Volk's a short and stocky 5'6" frame. On the other, it was Volk with his short and stocky 5'6" frame, which was his chief weapon against 27 MMA contenders, and crucial to 25 wins and 12 of those knockouts. Though the whole deal was upturned this time against the Aussie champ. He turned his losses to his advantage, bulking up his frame to emphasize his short height. It gave him an incredibly stable ground game and also sent a lot of power pumping into his punches. But this was exactly what was needed more for a move up to the lightweight division. No doubt, even eating becomes like training once you do hours of it every day. With Alex chowing down 4,000 calories a day, he got built up like a brick wall. Bulking up to the lightweight division's not an easy climb, especially since fighters in both these divisions are used to more or less an equal reach. But the featherweight champ didn't take things at face value and adjusted his strategy alongside his routines. This led him to admit that the idea of consuming 4,000 calories per day was problematic. Still, he stuck to his guns, perhaps tweaking things where needed to make the jump to lightweight, though he did credit his rugby background for making things more doable. Not only did Volk describe himself as feeling insanely stronger and twice as powerful, but he was ready to focus on putting his mind to strategy making. In this too, his desire to be the best was both mental and physical motivation for the fight. It shows in the takedown defense he managed to put up.
154.5 pounds, the official weight for Alexander Volkanovski.
Plus, he was aggressive in his approach, like he was confident of his power and training. Remarkably, the Great not only took less damage, but even caused some very visible damage to his opponent. So while he can get bigger as much as he likes, Islam was as big as he would probably be. In Volk's words about his 155-pound opponent, he's not going to get bigger. So you can bet he did all he could to make up for the height disadvantage. But the diet was only one part of the bigger picture, because his elite training camp allowed him to perfect his technique, having destroyed his opponents in the last 11 UFC fights and giving the promotion some memorable rivalries, especially his long-term competition with Max Holloway.
That's exactly right, earn not given. He's a great champion, and once I take that belt, I plan to...
With a background in grappling and power strikes, he was all ready to take on the Dagestani wrestler in Perth. It also helped that he started camp earlier for the fight. Pitched as an almost unanimous underdog for the match may have helped him go by under the radar. To keep up with all his training commitments, the Aussie champ was laser focused. In fact, the featherweight champ said that he and his camp were taking the fight incredibly seriously, and he also tapped into the importance of taking on good training partners and international coaching. So the tactical basics were all polished even further with expert sparring partners and an emphasis on his opponent's style, jiu-jitsu. To help with that, he got grappling geniuses like Craig Jones. Weighing in at around 95 kilograms, you can bet the Great wasn't fazed in the least by Islam around match day. As a result, both the ground game and stand-up were right on point for Volk. He was absolutely dominant throughout that 5th round and almost consistent throughout the match. Though besides all this, Alex also makes sure to do one other important thing before matches, and that's coming up with effective strategies. Aside from his physical and mental strength, what makes the champ so good for such a long streak was his fight IQ. Detailing his great understanding of the game, Volk analyzed his opponent's performance. Throughout the fight camp then, he had targets in place, like Islam's use of feet for example. Actively engaging with the strengths of his opponent in this way allowed him to even out the odds. From professional help to formal training, the champ oversaw his training to each detail. For this reason, Jordan Sullivan was contracted for the diet plan and making sure the conditioning was taken care of too. His short height gave him a good scrambling advantage, and the stocky frame was enough for stability. In the end, he was as well-rounded as his opponent had been up to that point. But it's important to remember that it's a new process each time for any of his opponents. I imagine if he's to fight Yair and beat him decisively, then you'll see the striker in Volk pretty soon. El Pantera is a tough opponent, but he's not a champ who's coming off an incredible bout against Islam Makhachev.
One more flurry.
Also, his experience of 11, 2, and 1 in the UFC trails behind the 34-year-old champ's almost perfect record ever since he joined the promotion. Plus, no matter the opponent, when Alexander's fight IQ comes into play, his competitor's in for a long fight. IQ doesn't change with weight classes, so the best-ranked fighter on the UFC's pound-for-pound list will still have his intuition. He credited this instinct and fight experience as giving him the leverage over his opponents. So, for example, Islam's back foot was neatly folded by the great, and his lack of distance coverage was exploited by Volk. Because Islam was used to taking down his opponent to end him with a submission, Alex did the same. Though, while none of the Dagestani's fans would have expected him to lean straight into the eye of the storm like that, I'd like to remind you that Alex knows how to proceed with caution too. The former rugby player may be used to tough knocks all throughout his career, but he values health and safety above all. It's no use straining yourself and getting injured, nor is it right to hurt your opponent potentially for the rest of their careers. So he said he doesn't take unnecessary risks. This risk calculation has really given him a lot of perspective on where to press on and where to slow down. For such an active fighter to have stayed undefeated for so many fights, this is a huge deal. It's also what'll power him all the way to lightweight once again. At 34 years of age, Volk's stamina's now undisputed.
Volkanovski, one of the best title rounds you will see.
He's only going to get to stay on his game though, only if he stays safe and doesn't risk it all at once. This attitude feeds his longevity, and with the fighter seeming to be in his prime, it's going to be a long ride still. But I'm sure that at the base of it are these fundamentals that the champion follows diligently. It's a new game plan each time, but the overall process stays the same. First game plan, then prepare, specifically for the worst. When that's all in place, there's hardly anything that surprises the Aussie in the ring, because he's imagined and worked for the worst of it already. And that's all from me on how Volk prepares for his fights.
But, obviously I'm always going to bet on myself. I tell everyone I'm a safe bet. Everyone
was using was pretty incredible. I controlled the whole fight with that. It wasn't just a basic jab.